will AI become their own marketers? Will we not even need marketing anymore?
Well, I think it's a funny concept. Because I was talking about this with a friend the other day. Like, what happens when the agent doing the purchasing is also an AI? And so it's not going to be a person that's necessarily making a buying decision. It would be an AI making a buying decision. And so then on the side that's trying to sell something, it would also be an AI optimizing the surface for selling that thing. So eventually you just have AIs talking to AIs.
Welcome back to The Observation. The Observation is powered by Cash App. When personal finance meets your funds and the stuff that matters, that's money, that's Cash App. Download the app, buy Bitcoin, not financial advice. Today, I have on the show Amanda Cassatt. She is the first de facto CMO of Ethereum. She just came out with her new book, and she's also the CEO of Serotonin. Amanda, thanks for coming on The Observation.
Thanks for having me, Aubrey.
I'm so pumped for you. This is, first of all, we have the book. We have two books in the studio right now. This was so exciting. This is your first book you've ever put out. And I feel like the process of writing a book is, everyone wants to do it, but nobody does. Sometimes it's I want to write a book. What was your moment of I have to write Web3 marketing?
So I basically been thinking about the same thing for 7, nearly 8 years. Started working on Ethereum stuff in 2015, became CMO of Consensus in 2016, built the first Web3 marketing team, took many of the first Web3 projects to market, the Consensus brand, Ethereum, MetaMask, Infura, Truffle, Gitcoin, a million other things that didn't work. Let's not worry about those. Built a lot of the processes around how to market something that's decentralized, and then took a lot of those best practices from Consensus to Serotonin, which quickly became the largest Web3 native marketing firm and now also product studio. But basically, I'd been thinking about the same thing for a long time. I was approached by an acquisitions editor from Wiley who said, we're going to acquire a book about Web3 marketing. We've come to you first, but if you don't write it, we will go to someone else. And so
wow.
I'd spent 7 years or so carving out this niche in Web3 marketing. And basically, I was getting blackmailed that they were going to hand it to
this.
Exactly, that they were going to hand it to somebody else if I didn't actually do it. And so I'd always been thinking about writing a book about my experience being so close to the early Ethereum movement, supporting it in the way that we did, building that first team, building those practices, which are really different from how marketing used to work in Web 2. But that really lit the fire for me to put pen to paper. And so that was in spring of 2022. And then I had a manuscript due in the fall of 22. And on my summer vacation, I was in Spain. And I basically wrote it on my phone. A friend of mine who's a professional biographer recommended that I write on my phone in the Notes app, because it actually slows you down enough that you end up more concise, because it's more expensive to write a single word when you're typing with your thumbs. And so what I told myself is I'm going to write 5,000 words a day until I get to 50,000 words. I was really militant, holding myself to that. I sat in the pool with a big hat and I typed on my phone into an outline that I'd pre-written, basically breaking down a lot of the learnings about Web3 marketing and interspersing them into my own story about first connecting with the Ethereum movement, building this team, eventually building Serotonin. And so I wrote that on my phone in about 10 days. I just wrote it from the very beginning to the very end, poured everything onto the page. My mentality was to not be a perfectionist. If you're going to go back and edit, you're never going to get it all on the page. So my goal was just to get it from the beginning to the end. 50,000 words ended up being more 65, 70, getting it all out there. Then I went back through with a research assistant and edited it all, made sure the citations were correct, made sure all the facts were correct, added facts and figures where I hadn't been able to recall them at the time. My thumbs hurt really badly. Yeah. But it worked. And now I know how I would write a book if I were ever to write a book again. And I feel like I have concrete recommendations for other people that are thinking about writing books. Stop telling people that you're going to write a book and just write. Don't be a perfectionist. Get it all down.
I love that so much. Yeah, it's like almost the fear of starting that almost trips people up and then they never do anything at all. But this is so amazing. Is this the first book in Web3 about marketing at all?
I believe so. It's definitely the first one from a major publisher. I think it's possible that other people have self-published their ideas.
Yeah. So when I started reading this, it's really interesting too. It goes like back into, first of all, you talk about writing on vacation, but then you also say like, you're just like your early beginnings. And, you know, as a fellow millennial, it's really interesting to talk about how you came even into this space at all. Yeah. And I know you so well, so I already know that story, but I want everyone else to know that story about how you kind of entered into this space.
Sure. So many people that got in here came via unconventional routes. It's a space that attracts cutting edge people, weirdos, adventurers,
nerds.
Risk takers, nerds. Yes, of course. But I was really interested in being a writer, and now ironically through this I have become one. I got into journalism, worked at the Huffington Post straight out of college for Arianna Huffington, where I saw firsthand how broken the media business model was because of digitization. I realized working on, especially the HuffPost blog platform, how hard it was going to be for online content creators to get paid for their work. And so when I left HuffPost, I started a platform called Slant, designed to help fix that problem. And what we did was we paid our creators, people that came and created content on the platform, 70% of the revenue from ads that we served across all the content. And so we took home 30%, we gave out 70%, and it behooved us to teach our creators how to market their content, how to package it up really well, how to share it on social in a way that would get traction. And that platform grew really quickly. We had a lot of college and journalism school contributors. It was around the time when campus news was really blowing up. So there'd be a lot of coverage downstream that cited our articles in Slant. And so it grew really quickly in terms of traffic, but there was a practical problem. In order to pay the creators out, we found ourselves often splitting the dollar or even splitting the cent and paying out to third-party payment processors in order to get everybody paid, because not every article would earn a lot of traffic. So often it was, splitting a dollar two ways.
Wow.
So the business model worked in theory, but didn't work in practice because of those third-party transaction fees. So I got obsessed with payments, which is different from being obsessed with journalism. I got obsessed with payments. There are all these micropayment-based business models that make logical sense but don't make practical sense because of the kind of Web2 payments paradigm. And so I started trying to figure out if there was a solution to this, stumbled on one of the first Ethereum meetups, met Joe Lubin, met Andrew Keys, met Christian Lundquist, a lot of early folks in that movement, got swept up in the crowd that would become Consensus, ended up joining the circus and becoming the first CMO there, starting in 2016. But basically, I came from an English major background. I'd also studied some stats. I taught myself a little bit of programming, enough to kind of know what people were talking about, but not enough to be good at it. And I wasn't really able to diligence Ethereum technology or code base when I first encountered it, but I could diligence the people. And I noticed that the people I was meeting in this early kernel of a community were the smartest people I'd ever met, and they had to be onto something. And through that triangulation, I was able to establish this is going to be really important. It solves so many different problems. And so I got to go all in on this bet.
So coming from a non-technical background, I think it's really interesting because I think in the crypto space, we have a lot of technical people and then we also have a lot of non-technical people. And I feel like this book really speaks to actually both. I think if you're coming in, you're technical and you're learning for the first time, it's still helpful. It gives so much context. But what would you say for people who are non-technical? I guess would you consider yourself non-technical coming into this space in terms of getting involved? Because I think that's maybe even like the most daunting thing. Most mainstream users are non-technical people. They're not like cryptographers being like, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't work that way. Most people are non-technical.
So what I think is really important if you're coming into the space as a marketer or in some kind of education, community, non-technical role is to try to understand everything you can about the technology. One thing I write about in my book is meeting some of my early Consensus colleagues and trying to get them to explain everything to me about Ethereum so I know how it works as well as I possibly can, because you can't get it wrong. And I think I worry that non-technical people coming into this space, it's easy for them to say, oh, all L1 blockchains are the same. It doesn't matter which one you use, because they don't actually understand the differences between them. Mm-hmm. Or to say, oh, it's fine to use a custodial wallet where you don't have root ownership of your assets because some big company says that's how they want to do their distribution. Well, it doesn't actually make sense with the values in the space and how the technology actually works. And so the fear is that people that don't really understand the tech are going to come in with opinions and values that don't make sense. And so that's why it's important for people to actually understand the technology as well as possible, especially if they're going to be promoting something within it. They have to make sure it's actually aligned with their values and what they care about, and the parts of the space that are actually meaningful and interesting. And so learning what those things were and aligning myself with those was one of the first steps that I took.
Yeah, and even people who are against it, it's like right now that we have conversations with a lot of politicians that are trying to be very anti-crypto, but have not done their diligence even understanding the different layer ones. So
well, what I find is, most people, just in general, in total general, are when they say something, are trying to get something. They're trying to get people to think about them a certain way. They're trying to get reelected, or they're trying to appeal to a certain demographic, or they're trying to be, loved by someone else and respected by someone else, rather than genuinely trying to express factual information. That's just how most people work. And so you got to look at those incentives when you think about how people are communicating about technology. Does this person actually know how anything works, and does it matter to them?
Yeah. So it's interesting that you got very interested in payments and micro payments, and you came in through Ethereum, but you also did discover Bitcoin first,
oh, yeah.
Correct?
Of course. So I was in college when I first learned about the Silk Road case, and people that I knew that had used Bitcoin were using it to buy like marijuana when it was still illegal. Yeah. if anyone listening to this can remember that.
In New York, you would never know because you just walk around and you're like, wow, this is just
and it's definitely like the most expensive pot anyone ever bought, for sure. But that was how a lot of people that weren't in crypto message boards found out for the first time about Bitcoin. And I wish I'd gotten into it, obviously, right in that moment. I thought it was interesting. But that was the first use case I was exposed to. And then when we were thinking about Ethereum, I was talking about Bitcoin all the time when I was explaining it to people. So like, imagine for a second.
And what year is this? Sorry.
This is like 2015, 2016. Okay. Imagine for a second that people have heard of Bitcoin mostly through the Silk Road case. So they're associating it with all kinds of dark stuff, but maybe they know a little bit about how it works. Maybe they've heard the word blockchain, but no one knows about Ethereum. How do you explain it? So you go like this. This is what we figured out. Well, you've heard of Bitcoin, right? Yes. Bitcoin is actually built on a technology called a blockchain. And there isn't just one blockchain. There's an idea that you could build another blockchain. Like a blockchain is a type of technology. And so Ethereum is another blockchain. And what's different about it is that instead of just being able to send money securely around a decentralized network, permissionless, censorship resistant, et cetera, it's also programmable. And you can use it to build any kind of application that handles any kind of value on the internet. And then I added this layer on top, which is, this is a fulfillment of the original vision of the web. The original web architecture was in many ways decentralized and intended to be, fairly censorship resistant. And now, a lot of that has been captured by governments. But there's this error code, a 402 error, that's in the original source code of the web. That's payment missing. And you see a 404, but you rarely see a 402, but it's in there.
Yeah.
And the reason there's that error code is because the original architects intended for there to be an internet native payments layer, but they didn't get around to building it, right? And so what Ethereum does is retroactively add that programmable value layer to the web. The web 1 to web 2 really started with communications. It prioritizes, okay, we're going to democratize being able to create some kind of piece of content and circulate it to other people. That's huge, world changing, paradigm shifting. But value got added on later. in this Web2 paradigm where the only way to add a business model on top of this was through advertising, because there wasn't web native payments. And so this value model gets tacked on. And what Web3 does via Ethereum is start with value and use value as the foundation or the rails of the next generation of the web. And now it's super cool. People are building social, people are building all kinds of communication things on top of it. So I think we'll end up in the same spot.
So many interesting things you just said there. I mean, I have a few thoughts, but the advertising model, I think, just going back to what you just said, do you almost feel like the entire media landscape was kind of fucked over by like Web 1, Web 2 because of this? Like, it's really interesting, right? Because we democratized information first. And it's interesting that we didn't do that with money or having like, it was just like an interesting process of how things happened. And so it's like, like if that didn't happen, we'd be in a very different world potentially today, even with like our elected officials and just the entire world would be very, very different. And it feels like, do you think we got it backwards in some senses?
Yeah. So it's funny. We simultaneously say two things and never actually bring them into, association with each other. One is that we're in an information economy. And the other thing is that information trends toward becoming free. Well, how can those two things coexist? If our economy is based on information and all information wants to be free, seems like our economy is based on something that is soon going to be free.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see a little bit of that with AI, with this huge asymmetry between the ability to create content and the time-limited ability for humans to consume content. So we're going to start seeing that asymmetry just totally take off. So we're in a new era of that right now. But yeah, digital content creates the double spend problem. So you can copy and paste it really easily. Obviously, crypto exists to solve a lot of the double spend problems. And the other thing it did was you could monitor what kind of content people were consuming. And people used to answer surveys and say, I love consuming news and I don't care that much about pop culture. Well, when you actually look at the data, and digitization gave us the ability to look at the data of what people are actually consuming from media companies, they found that people don't care about vegetables and just wanted candy. Then it was a big race to the bottom between publishers to publish the most candy. The vegetables stopped getting very well funded. The quality of actual journalism and the number of outfits that were able to invest in high quality investigative journalism went down. Then suddenly the only source of distribution of content becomes social. And so everybody fully pays the piper, depends on social entirely for their distribution. Then suddenly the social platforms say, oh, we want to keep you on platform. We don't actually want people to link out, because then they leave the platform and their eyeballs are away from our advertisers. So they deprioritize all the media links. So then all the media that are dependent on the social gets screwed. Meanwhile, they've raced to the bottom. And so the content has become so bargain basement that advertisers don't even want to advertise on it. And why would they advertise on it when they can just advertise directly on the social platforms, which is where people are? And the information ecology, as a consumer of information, the result is that the information ecology gets poorer. And that sucks.
Yeah. It does. I mean, it's so different from, I think, when we entered the job market. I remember just being really excited about, I had like a similar background in journalism and was really excited about, I was interested in politics, a lot of similar things. And, you just kind of realize that the quality that we were working with when I was younger, I used to tune into CNN and watch, journalism every day. And there was so much trust. There was so much respect for these organizations. And now there's it's just nothing. It's totally depleted.
I mean, a huge bulk of cable news is unwatchable by someone like us.
Exactly. No one's even watching cable news. The social media platforms have everyone literally by the balls. I don't even know how to. I'm making this. I don't even know what I'm saying. But do you know what I mean? There is. You said it, but it's kind of insane how fast things have gotten, where you cannot even get out information quick enough. I mean, I was watching the Met Gala as it was happening in real time. E-News can't report it faster than people are putting TikToks up about it. There's just the users, the people have so much control, but also the algorithm has so much control now. And I think that's really interesting and potentially really scary up for centralized platforms.
Yeah, but it's changing and I have hope. So change hope vibes for me are individuals who are really cool, great journalists and want to investigate things deeply and think deeply and not be obsessed with this, left-right thing in the US, going to Substack. I subscribe to a bunch of Substacks. I'm into that. Podcasting really taking off. I think people have a thirst for high quality, in-depth conversations, and you see that in the numbers. I think there are also a lot of people who want to listen and watch rather than read directly. I think that's fine. People who are doing other tasks, people that are driving, and there's been a renaissance of great watchable and listenable content. The Audible for my book will come out soon. That was really important to me.
Yeah.
I think people's craving for thoughtful content isn't going to go away.
I don't think the craving, potentially the funding for it could go, because you have like long form journalism. I guess it just takes a different model.
I think it'll decentralize. I think it'll just move away from institutions because the demand is there. I believe the supply will be there, but I think it'll just happen in a bunch of decentralized channels instead of the big companies.
So does cable news, magazines, newspapers fall away, in your opinion? People have been saying this for years, have been trying to call it. Do you think?
I think there's a generational thing for sure with cable news, and I think once a certain generation bids farewell, I think a lot of that paradigm might just go with it naturally.
Yeah,
those people are living increasingly long lives, so I don't know how long this will take, but I think that's probably how that goes. I think newspapers have, especially ones with big brands, have an opportunity to invest in really high quality reporting and content and turn that around for themselves if they want.
So let's go back to what you're talking about and explaining Ethereum. I think it's interesting because I've heard people try to explain, when you were talking about explaining it to someone who had only maybe heard of Bitcoin. A lot of people early on, I remember trying to explain Bitcoin as like, Bitcoin is gold and Ethereum is like infrastructure. And now we're kind of, and I don't know if I love that analogy. It's just the one that people used to say a lot because it was easier to explain.
You got gold and oil too sometimes.
Gold and oil, something that's easy and relatable for people to understand from what they know. And I think it's interesting now because Bitcoin in many ways is having, a renaissance of its own with ordinals. And I think it's interesting. There's a quote in your book that talks about, and I believe this is a quote from Vitalik, but if it's not, we'll have to fact check it. But it says, he said something like, trying to build on Bitcoin is asking a dog to walk on its hind legs. The system wasn't built for functionality. And now you see, because of upgrades to Bitcoin's network, things like Taproot have allowed for ordinals to exist. And now people are inscribing NFTs. There's been like record numbers hit. There was like 3 million ordinals inscribed in 4 days, hit that metric last week. So there's like a lot of growth now happening on Bitcoin. And I think it's interesting to just get your take of what's happening there as someone who was like, I want to build the next internet. I want to like be involved in the Ethereum ecosystem.
Yeah, of course. Well, there would be no Ethereum without Bitcoin, that's for sure. And I think the divide is often sort of arbitrary and without good reason. I'm a big fan of Bitcoin. I think part of what makes Bitcoin so cool and valuable is how slow it is to change versus Ethereum that processes EIPs fairly quickly. And I think the niche of each is just genuinely different. And Ethereum is fast moving with fast governance, and Bitcoin is intentionally slow moving with slow governance. And that's what makes it like gold in a way. Obviously, it moves a little faster than gold, which doesn't, right? There's no no devs. And nothing to do, right? Yeah. But I think ordinals are super cool. I'm happy to see people innovating and building on Bitcoin. Some of the most valuable technologies ever to hit this world have come from people trying to build on Bitcoin. So I have to be and am super supportive of that.
I do think it's interesting now with different, even luxury brands coming into this space. You have like people like Bugatti who announced they're going to do something. You have 12-fold with Yuga Labs, and then just some other brands that are trying to choose now a chain to work on. And now Bitcoin was never even considered in that chain. Like it was like pretty much Polygon and Ethereum, and obviously like Solana potentially. But like I think most people, kind of didn't even include it in that conversation. Do you think now it potentially could be a part of the conversation?
Honestly, no. I don't think there are many big brands thinking that they're going to build a blockchain thing on Bitcoin. It's not something I've ever heard. I think it could be cool as a differentiator if someone wanted to do it. If a brand came to us saying they wanted to do that, I would, want to explain the capabilities of different platforms, but it could be interesting, especially if they wanted to target a particular community. So I think, a lot of these decisions have to be made based on who your audience is. The flip side is we really guide brands when we work with brands at Serotonin and also our NFT software spin-out Mojito toward making sure they're using as decentralized a layer 1 blockchain as possible, because decentralization is kind of the point. And then also that they're offering their consumers root ownership of any Web3 assets that they're creating, or a path to root ownership that they can take whenever they wish, as opposed to like a total custodial wallet. And if you aren't doing those things, it's not really Web3 onboarding, even if it's a big brand doing it, even if they're using Web3 terminology. So we try to guide the brands we work with to entering Web3, a Web3 native way that doesn't obviate the actual benefits of doing something in the space, and would certainly not shy away from exploring doing something with Bitcoin or on Bitcoin. But it isn't the first kind of logical leap to make, considering how much functionality and programmability there is with something like Ethereum, or something like an Arbitrum or a Polygon or an Optimism as an L2.
And so when brands were coming to Serotonin during the bull, and I'm sure you were like, what was business like? Were you just like flooded? What was happening internally?
For sure. So Serotonin grew really fast. We grew 500% in the last bull market. We're now over about 100 people.
Oh my God.
Which is crazy.
Are you bigger than Consensus? Or are you about the same?
No. Consensus is like 1,200, 1,000 people.
Oh, really? Okay.
Consensus is a monster.
Okay.
In a good way.
I thought it was leaner than that for some reason.
Well, it's split into 2 entities, and we could go down that path if you want, but we might need to get counsel up in here. But so about 100 people. We spun out our first venture spin out, Mojito, NFT e-commerce platform, API driven. It powers Sotheby's, it powers CAA and all their talent, and a bunch of other brands in the space like Milwaukee Bucks and other teams. So we spun that out, raised 20 at 100 in there, and that's been doing really well. Have had over 120 million of transactions over Mojito rails in those marketplaces, which is great.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Amazing.
So that's part of what we did with the kind of bull market energy, is build that platform, basically reinvest the profits from the services business and building a software company, raising venture into it and spinning it out. And then we
explain that a little bit more for people who
So basically what happened to Serotonin was we grew so much so quickly during the 2020-21 run up. We certainly couldn't take every client that wanted to work with us, and we're super selective. We really only take projects we believe in, and yet we had the margins and the profitability to be able to invest cash in building something more scalable than a services business. And we had so many different customers. We learned from them what was missing in the market, and we built into that. And what we learned was that brands wanted to sell NFTs at the time, but also now all kinds of other Web3 goods like membership, rewards, all that kind of loyalty, all that kind of stuff. They wanted to do it on their own sites, in their own kind of e-commerce protocols, rather than doing it on a third-party platform. And that makes perfect sense, right? Like in the Web2 e-commerce world, you have the Amazons and the eBays of the world, but when you're Chanel, you don't bring your new handbag line to eBay first, you have it on your own website first. Yeah. And so the same way that we're going to have like the OpenSeas of the world, the Blurs of the world, the Looksrares or whoever else pops up, we're also going to have the owned e-commerce websites of the world. And every single store, every single online store is going to start selling some kind of digital goods, and perhaps Web3 goods are going to replace receipts, and almost everything you buy will have some kind of Web3 receipt to it at the very least. So that's what we wanted to build with Mojito. They just launched something really cool new with Sotheby's, which is secondary marketplace functionality. After you buy something on the original Sotheby's Metaverse marketplace, and they're launching marketplaces all over. It's really the most advanced actual tech in that space of enablement for brands when it comes to selling Web3 goods. So super excited about that. And then we also just grew our pipeline a ton. We started working a lot directly with VCs. working with a lot of the leading VCs in the space who would send us their portfolio companies exactly when they were ready to work with us, when they have a big value capture, step function growth moment on the horizon. That's the perfect moment to come work with us so we can knock marketing out of the park and make sure that goals get hit.
I love that. Coming from a PR background, it's always hard to figure out when someone is ready, because sometimes companies and projects think they're ready to have marketing, PR, whatever, even social, and they're not. And that's a really tough thing. And I think everyone also thinks they know PR and marketing. And it's something that I kind of really hate too, which I love that you explain this so well, obviously in your book, of how to set yourself up. And what do you say to that, to people who kind of feel like they know that they get it, but like they're not, and you have clients that are like executing in some way, or potential people that feel like they know what they're doing, but they're not doing it in the traditional model, I guess you would say, that we have. Like there's a lot of projects that are grassroots, right? And they don't even need it. Like, but then there's some people who like just don't have any clue what they're doing in this space.
Well, First, it's about defining marketing for Web3. So there's a great tweet from, I don't know if you know Eva Balin from Graph Foundation, but she had a great tweet, which was, there's building and there's trading, everything else is marketing. Yeah. And that quote is in the book. And I think that's really clever, because a lot of people don't know what marketing is. And it's everything else when you're trying to do the matching exercise between potential users and the thing that they would use if only they knew it existed, right? You're not trying to sell people something that they don't actually want. You're not trying to shove something down people's throats. You're not trying to, it's not like Web 2 style influencers hawking vitamin waters on Instagram. Yeah. It's about connecting people with something that they would use, would want if only they knew about it. So it's like matching. It's market making in a certain way. It's everything but actually building the tech or doing the trading.
And you talk in your book about something called like Web 2.5, which I think is really... I like why you call it that, but do you want to explain that a little bit? Yeah,
it's actually become such a used term that people forget that we actually coined it in Serotonin. So Matthew Isles, my co-founder, actually coined that term super early, many years ago. And the Web 2.5 refers to the spectrum of companies and projects that are neither fully Web 2, so completely centralized, nor are they fully Web3. And let's just create like a pirate flag waving definition of what fully Web3 means, right? If you're fully decentralized, do you even have an entity? Or are you just completely governed by a DAO that doesn't even have a need for an entity necessarily, right? Yep. Is your stack completely decentralized? Have you not only decentralized the contracts with Ethereum and decentralized the front end with something like an Arweave or an IPFS? Have you also decentralize the underlying infrastructure, right? Are you using AWS? So almost every project, you can find something centralized that they're doing. So there's really a giant spectrum here. People talk about something like FTX, right? FTX is a traditional centralized exchange that just happens to give people upside exposure, or did give people upside exposure to crypto assets. It wasn't actually allowing people root ownership of their assets when it wasn't a Web3 company. Yeah. So there's this giant spectrum. You got something like Nike with Swoosh that's offering people a genuine Web3 asset. You got something like Starbucks. Right. And so you got Chipotle offering their, proof of stake burrito discount on Ethereum merge day. You get Sotheby's allowing people to bid on auctions in ETH and to connect their MetaMask when they come to the Sotheby's metaverse to buy an NFT. What are those companies? Those are all Web 2.5 in some way. And also a lot of companies that you think of as Web3 companies are really also on that spectrum of Web 2.5 because they have some centralized elements. And decentralization is a design choice in response to a problem, which is attempted hacking, manipulation, censorship. And if you don't have that problem, or at the layer of the stack where you actually have that problem, that's the place where you actually need decentralization. And perhaps you don't need full decentralization at the layers of the stack or in the areas of your business that aren't under threat from those kinds of vectors. So decentralization isn't just an arbitrary ideological thing. It's a solution to a problem. And I think that we will have a better layer one, for lack of a better word, a better foundational layer of our global financial infrastructure if that layer is decentralized, which means no censorship, which means permissionless, transparent, same rules for everyone. And then that thing needs to be programmable in order to actually really work on the web.
There's something interesting too when people come into this space or brands come into this space and they almost market to crypto Twitter. They put their announcements out to crypto Twitter, but they might not put them out to Instagram and other platforms that are their larger Web2 audience, which I think is like kind of interesting. It's like they're testing the waters here on Twitter because, as you know, you said in your book, like love it or hate it, crypto Twitter is crypto Twitter. But, you know, do you like that feeling? Or is it like, do you feel like they need to holistically integrate it into their brand and that they're kind of half putting their foot in and trying to just make a lot of money and like come in with a splash and then not really like feed that community? Because I do feel like it's really hard for these teams who are coming from the Web2 side to be like, okay, now I'm going to take on this new community, which is a little potentially different or the same as our current user base.
Yeah. So you got to know your audience.
Yeah.
And it depends so much on your audience. So figure out who the person is that would buy the thing that you're selling and where they are, what channels they're on, what they're paying attention to. The truth is a lot of Web3 projects do have Web3 as their audience, right? Whether it's Web3 devs, whether it's traders, whether it's NFT buyers, Web3 people are often the audience for Web3 native products, especially ones that require coming in with, like, let's say a MetaMask. And in that case, crypto Twitter is a great place to go. And the more attention that you can get there, the better. If you're trying to reach generalist consumers, they're not going to be on crypto Twitter. They're going to be in other places. Maybe that's Instagram based on where you are. Maybe that's TikTok based on where you are. Maybe it's making sure you get in the generalist media. It's all about knowing your audience and reaching them on the channels where they live.
Do you think, going back to the media side, earned media, do you think that is still valuable now for these brands to be getting their names in there into earned media compared to crypto Twitter? So like crypto Twitter obviously can get you a ton of attention. You need to work the algorithm a little bit, but you can get a lot of exposure, potentially more exposure than you would in a mention in an article that you don't know if someone reads all the way down to. Like, what are you advising your clients on now?
I advise clients to get everything they can.
Yeah.
And I think of all of these channels as just perception. Perception is everywhere. There's just a big patchwork of perception. And you want to have your message carried by as many appropriate channels that reach your target audience as possible. So if you have an announcement that is going to be deemed newsworthy by media, get it in the media. If you don't, and in general anyway, you want to get it out on social. And even if you have some kind of announcement that media isn't going to write about, it's fine. You can make sure using people that are already aligned with your project to pre-build in distribution for an announcement by, asking people to cross-amplify and building that in advance and having something really visually beautiful and interesting in how you present it on social. You can get a ton of distribution for that, even if no earned media outlet will take your story. So you can certainly, even if you can't earn media for a piece of news or an announcement, which is often the case, especially with fundraisers below a certain threshold, new product or feature launches, you may care a lot about this on your team, but the media may not care about it. Don't be discouraged. You can definitely create buzz through other channels. That being said, get that media story if people are willing to cover it, for sure.
Yeah.
And because it looks great for SEO. It's going to, help your website ranking when they mention you, especially if they link to your website. It's great for there to just be news articles for potential investors to look at when they Google your product or your company name.
Yeah.
There's every reason to just try every channel. The reason why Ethereum and a lot of the other projects that we've marketed between our original Web3 marketing team and Serotonin have been so successful is because we do all the above. Our thesis is never, use this one channel and ignore all the other channels. No, you got to control perception and make sure your message is consistent across all the channels that your potential target audience is going to knock up against. Otherwise, they're going to fall out of funnels.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are really full stack. Like, you have everything. You have and I don't know any other company that actually offers that to the caliber that you guys do.
We built our offering based on what people actually wanted, not based on what we felt like offering. And
So good.
And what we learned was this space is full of really high quality technical founders that want to do engineering, that want to do R&D, that want to build products, but that don't want to do marketing.
Yeah.
And that's fine. We built this so we could take care of that.
I love that. What's something like you're the proudest of, doing now during the last cycle that you were like, hell yeah, this is amazing for Serotonin and just the team?
Sotheby's. Sotheby's has been so cool. So like Sotheby's was founded in 1741. I think it might be the oldest auction house in the world.
It is, yeah.
And a lot of times, big brands will say, oh, we're too traditional for, going into Web3. I'm like, well, if Sotheby's can do it, you can definitely do it. Also, art is one of the most regulated asset classes because people have been money laundering with art since the dawn of time, right? And so it's one of the most regulated. So it's super highly regulated, very long-standing, traditional kind of business. And they were able to hit the Time 100 list of companies that matter most because of their work in this space. They were able to sell like $100 million worth of NFTs basically right out of the gate, became a huge portion of their revenue from their work with us on the Serotonin side with strategy and branding, and also on the Mojito side, which is the rails that they actually used in order to go out into this market. Did an extraordinary job. So it was Christie's that came in first with that 69 million Metacoven Beeple sale, but it was Sotheby's that ended up coming through the strongest with an actual kind of, with one of the few existing marketplace platforms that functions like a CMS, where there's an internal team inside the company that's able to actually sell Web3 goods whenever they feel like it.
So fucking amazing. So cool. So when do you advise a client to, and this is for, advice for CEOs and people who are potentially looking to get an agency, but then when do you think someone takes it fully in-house? It's like, I think sometimes people go agency when they're starting out, and then they need kind of like a full team that's just dedicated to that. And I think that shift is really interesting too.
So a lot of this is in the book, whether you're a Web2 company getting into Web3 or whether you're a startup just getting started. But you need some kind of counterparty for your marketing people to talk to, whether they're internal people or external people. Is that your CEO? Is that your COO? Figure out who that person is. CEO is the best, especially if you're small. You need to figure out who that counterparty is going to be that's in charge of it. It can't just be nobody's business. Once you figure that out, figure out which kinds of functions are consistent versus intermittent. And what I mean is you're only going to sometimes have a press release. You're only going to sometimes need a video. But you're going to need someone to maintain your social and community channels all the time. And you need to have someone, I would recommend, in place all the time. So maybe an internal hire. Maybe this is your CEO. Tweeting is no longer the realm of interns. It's so important in this space that it's often the realm of CEOs. So you need someone to be maintaining whatever channels you choose that's able to publicly represent the company. Maybe that's your first marketing hire, and that person should be a generalist Swiss Army knife kind of marketer that can serve as a counterparty to agencies. But I wouldn't hire more than that person to begin with. And then you have an agency for your intermittent functions, for everything else that you need, especially while you're early, before you have product market fit. You do not want to start spending a bunch of money on marketing until you have the first grains of product market fit going. And what that marketing team is helping you do is put your brand and what you're doing out there enough to start probing for product market fit and then feeding those insights back to the product team. Right? And so that's what that early team is doing. And you're going to start doing owned and earned media. So you're going to create whatever social channels you want. Do not create empty channels. Only create channels that your target audience is actually on and that you have the resources to staff. You do not need to have every channel. So you need to create that. You need to have your website. Your website is your storefront. You need to have a visual brand on your website, and you have to have a call to action to be able to capture people so you can retarget them. Maybe that's following you on social media. Maybe that's subscribing to a newsletter. And then any other kinds of call to action, maybe once your product is live, to use the product, connect your wallet, whatever that is, that needs to live on your website, and that needs to funnel really well. And then you need to get your core message that's on your website out to the world. And you're doing that with content that's going to rank in Google when people search for the main things that your project is doing. You need to try to go speak at events. That's a form of earned. Pitch yourself to go speak at these things once you actually have that backstop ready to capture the energy that comes from it, like your website. You should be doing press whenever you actually have something to say to the media. Oftentimes this is a first fundraise, your first partnerships, etc. And then you want to start building community however you can, building buzz, getting people into a channel altogether.
Community is thrown around a lot in this space, and a lot of people want community before they have a product. And it's interesting too, because that has worked in some situations. But how did you feel like we've almost just run that word dry, and it's just like we need to almost like it almost has gotten, you know, your community is not your exit liquidity, like people, you know, getting rugged, and like communities almost like, and do you feel like that actually represents it? Because it's like a shared value system really is a community in so many ways, but then it's like finance is introduced. So like, is it just audience to you? Is community actually a community? Like who's doing that right in this space?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually like eating a bag of kale chips the other day, and in the copy on the back, it said, you know, we've designed these kale chips for the community of people that eat multiple snacks per day. And I was like, that's not a community. There's no community of people that eat snacks. Like
and gather in like the snack,
like,
multi-snack.
And so that word gets overused in Web3, outside of Web3. But one thing I say in the book is there's actually a technical meaning of that word in Web3 that I try to, you know, isolate, which is the incentive-aligned group of people that collapses the categories of investors, builders, and users. And those people all take on each other's roles. Like investors can actually contribute to the code base. Users can help market a product. Builders can be invested in some kind of novel way, and users themselves. So those categories are really bright line divided, and sometimes even adversarial in a Web 2 context. They get economically intrinsic incentive, extrinsic incentive aligned in a Web 3 context. And all of those aligned folks, whether they're on your community channel or not, that's your community. They're the folks that are going to try to help you succeed because they have some kind of intrinsic, extrinsic incentive to do that. And that concept is the secret sauce of Web3. And it's the reason why Web3 products can theoretically outcompete Web2 products.
So cool. What are some things that you're getting really excited about? I know you're excited about zero knowledge proofs and obviously L2s, but what are you kind of looking forward to? We're still, I would say, in a bear. But what are you excited, you know, for what the builders are doing right now?
Yeah. So L2s are really interesting. We got to, you know, make it cheap and scalable, but still also settle out to a decentralized layer 1 to do stuff on Web3. Totally. Zero knowledge proofs are really interesting. You got to make a lot of transactions configurably private in order for folks to desire to put those transactions on a chain, which makes total sense. Mm-hmm. Then you've got cool stuff. I think there are a lot of new projects that are focused on root ownership, whether those are for institutions being able to self-custody, whether those are being able to monitor the custody status of all of your funds across platforms that they're on, having access to your funds at all times, ability to monitor your funds at all times. People responded really strongly to some of the centralized finance collapses, whether that's FTX, like Celsius, BlockFi. Even like its institutions used to be saying, we're so big, we can't possibly self-custody. Now they're saying, we're so big, it's too risky to not self-custody. Yeah. And everyone's saying that from the individual level up to the institutional level. And that's really interesting. And we're going to see more products that serve that group. I think the intersection of AI and, Are
you guys, and I saw you put out a message and I don't remember.
We just started an AI, a crypto AI newsletter at Serotonin.
Yeah.
Sign up for it at serotonin.co. Basically, just selfishly, I asked our content team to create that because I want to read a newsletter about what's going on there. A lot of cool stuff.
So you're super bullish on AI.
Oh yeah. So a couple of different directions that could go at the intersection of just gonna like throw these out there at the intersection of AI and crypto. One like really low hanging fruit one is AI code audits, whether that's like an AI co-pilot that works with you, whether that's something that happens after the fact once your code base exists and is live in the world. One of the pushbacks that's legitimate that we get about CeFi as opposed to DeFi is, well, yeah, CeFi custodies your assets for you and there's a lot of risk there, and DeFi doesn't do that. You get to hold on to your asset. But on the flip side, there have been a lot of hacks and failures of DeFi protocols. Fine. But once we have AI verification that code bases are hard to say flawless, but that they've been diligenced by AI, that's pretty credible. And that kind of is that last argument for DeFi against CeFi. And there's pretty much no other argument for CeFi over DeFi other than that. So that's pretty cool. Other interesting crypto AI stuff. I mean, you've seen things like Numerai exist a long time that are really interesting. I think we're going to see, a profusion of content that's generated by humans and generated by AI. You're going to want to have provenance tracking for that content and be able to prove that something is from a human. There's going to be a huge asymmetry, like what I was saying before, between the amount of content produced and the amount of content someone can consume. Someone wants to verify where content came from. There's going to be a lot of that. And then I'm interested in these concepts around proving biometrically that you are a human on the web. I think so. And that's really interesting and might become necessary. And then finally, like, if AIs are going to be agents that are doing economic activity, which they will very soon, very, very soon, what kind of currency are they going to transact in? Well, they're going to transact in digital native. They're digital natives, right?
Yeah.
We talk about like Gen Z as digital natives. They're not digital natives.
Yeah.
They're organic. None of us are really digital natives, right? We're biological natives. But AI is digitally native. They're going to use digitally native currencies. And what the question is whether AIs will create their own L1s and currencies or whether they'll use the existing ones. Interesting to think about. And then they're probably going to transact in this stuff.
That's so fascinating to me. So do you think that AI is integrated with Web3?
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's in its own thing?
They're friends.
Because
They're
I
friends.
feel like people almost for like AI and then Web3, but like it has to be together.
Oh, they're friends. They're just digitally native technologies that are new platforming technologies, right? I think ultimately Web3 provides digitally native economic rails, and the type of economic activity that runs over them is going to be mostly AI agents.
Mm. And do you think that this is going to, like, you know, you have people coming out, the technologists from Google, and people getting really, really freaked out? What would you say to the people that are kind of feel fearful right now of AI, and they're probably also non-proponents of crypto or Web3?
I've never heard a logical argument for how a pause on AI research would work. Like, how would we know as a group that it was time to unpause? And also other countries would still be working at the same time, so you can't actually execute a humanity-wide pause. I'm a bit of an accelerationist. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, the things that are going to happen are happening. Let's be conscious and let's program these things intelligently. I'm not really a buyer for the idea that life springs into something at a certain moment. You can take a course at MIT on how to create AI, but there's no course on how to, you know, create conscious life. I think a lot of this stuff is anthropomorphized, you know, movie stuff that's not necessarily that logical. But what I understand, the fear that I resonate with empathetically is we've always been the smartest thing on this planet, the highest IQ thing. And we are already on a fast path toward creating something that is higher IQ than us. Mm. And that's scary because we're no longer the smartest thing around. Mm. And I understand empathetically being fearful about that. But I do think that we are going to be able to harness the power of intelligence to improve our lot as we've been able to in the past.
Will AI become their own marketers? Will we not even need marketing anymore?
Well, I think it's a funny concept. Because I was talking about this with a friend the other day. Like, what happens when the agent doing the purchasing is also an AI? And so it's not going to be a person that's necessarily making a buying decision. It would be an AI making a buying decision. And so then on the side that's trying to sell something, it would also be an AI optimizing the surface for selling that thing. Mm-hmm. So eventually you just have AIs talking to AIs. And so that's going to be that's a different audience, right? We're going to have to learn about our audience and know our audience in a new way.
I love that so much. Okay, tell everyone where they can get the book, where to follow you. I'll plug all the things.
All right, great. The book is called Web3 Marketing. You can find it on Amazon. And then Serotonin is at serotonin.co. Check it out. Send us a note. There's a hello@serotonin.co inbox that you can check out on there. Mojito is our NFT e-commerce spin-out. Franklin, our second spin-out. Hybrid, cash, crypto, tax compliant payments for teams. And then what else? Follow me on Twitter, amanda.eth, at Amanda Cassatt, CASSATT.
Love it so much. This is honestly the Bible. Like, I cannot recommend. If you're crypto curious, Web3 curious, you should get this book. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the observation.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll be back next time. Good luck and Godspeed.
You don't